What did a school teacher say that stuck with you? One day in 7th grade our principal came into the homeroom class and wrote on the board $19.32 in big numbers. He got our attention and announced to the class, "This," pointing at the number, "is what you are worth. Every day you come to class, the school gets $19.32 from the state for each of you. So if you are sick, you should still come to class, go to the nurse, and get sent home. That way the school will still get its $19.32. That was the day I stopped caring about school. I'm pretty sure he was trying to increase attendance and believed what he said was positive. But when a person you're supposed to respect tells you you're worth less than a $20 bill. My teacher told me that I had a beautiful soul and mind, which I took as meaning that I was fugly and was being pitied, but later on realized that it was her way of showing me special attention because I was an introverted loner. This reminds me of a science teacher I had who would do a little pre-exam ritual thingy to help ease anxiety and help students focus. She would turn off the lights and have everyone relax and close their eyes, put their head on their arms on the table, etc., and play calming ocean sounds from her computer while walking around the classroom calming taking to us. She basically would start with saying to take deep breaths, think about your favorite place to relax, and recognize that we are all living, breathing, emotional human beings capable of love and care and with hobbies or skills outside of the course we were taking. That the exam was a simple measure to see what you have learned, not to see how smart you are or how good you are with the topic at hand. That the outcome of the test had no impact on who you are as a human and doubtful that it highlights our best skills or areas of expertise. The first time I experienced this, like any high schooler, my initial thought was okay lady, whatever, but holy shit did it help. I remember one time in particular when I was struggling with the course and about to take an exam. While she did this, she stopped and calmly rested her hand on my shoulder for a moment while my head was down and seriously thought I was going to break out crying. I felt like she was in my corner rooting for me at a point where I was struggling, and I will never forget it. All through the rest of high school and university I would rethink and try to relive that ritual before exams, and it helped me big time. Easily one of the best teachers I have ever had. In French class in high school, over 20 years ago, part of the lesson was going over some sentences in French. She pointed one out in particular. I go to school on the bus. My horrible attempt at typing it was something like "Je viens à l'école en bus." I understand I've probably triggered people who speak French. I apologize. I remember vividly the teacher saying, for some reason, this is the only French any of my students ever remember after they're done with this class. Here I am, 2+ decades, removed from that class in the 90s, and that's the only French I remember. I had a maths teacher who was an older woman, really strict, and nobody particularly liked her. We mocked her way of speaking and were generally mean teenage assholes. Once, when I was around 15, I hadn't finished my homework, so I dropped my book in a puddle and showed it to her in class to say I'd lost the homework so couldn't hand it in. She questioned me a bit on how it had happened, then asked me to stay after class. The whole lesson I was shitting myself, expecting to be absolutely bar locked once everyone else had gone. So when the bell rang I sheepishly went up and sat at her desk after everyone had left. To my surprise, she didn't shout at me, but gently asked if I was being bullied and somebody had taken my workbook and ruined it on purpose. I was a little skinny kid with glasses and braces, so I can see why she would have thought that, but in that moment I suddenly saw her as a human being with feelings and empathy, and not just a teacher. I felt like shit for the way I had treated her, and for lying about what had happened. I never admitted it to her, just reassured her that I was fine, but it did stick with me, and I was much less of a dick to teachers after that. This reminds me of a similar thing that happened to me at around the same age that I still cringe about sometimes. I was several weeks into a course in high school. I still hadn't bought the textbook. When the teacher found out I didn't have the book, she took me aside and asked why. Being a dumb teenager, without thinking I gave her some lame excuse about the book being too expensive. My family was solidly middle class, and, although not rich, my parents definitely would have bought the book for me. The real reason was just that I was lazy. but my teacher looked sincerely concerned and quietly handed me a $20 bill. I was caught off guard and mortified. Of course, I did buy the book right away after that. And then later, that year returned a $20 to the teacher. I always struck by the generosity of a teacher who would do that for her students, but I felt awful about how what I thought was an innocent lie turned out. Definitely a valuable lesson in honesty, lol. My art teacher told me I couldn't draw. Fast forward 15 years and I've graduated university with a fine art degree and have my own small illustration business as a side gig. It's not a huge thing, but I've had over 150 sales now and have like actual fans. So, screw you Miss H. Edit. Wow, thanks for the well wishes everyone, and for sharing your own stories. It made my heart happy. I won't share my work on here, because I'm going through a rebrand ATM, and I try to keep this account anonymous, but thank you for asking. For those interested, the book is Illustration Workshop by Mary Kate McDenritt. I highly recommend it if you're out of practice or want to look at drawing in different styles. This came from a teacher who hated my guts, and I his. We never got along. I disliked what he taught and how he taught it. He thought I was pompous and bragged about my grades. Maybe pompous, but never bragged about my grades. Anyway, we had turned in our ethics final paper, and mine was 20 pages long or so. Sometime later, he asked me to come by his room to pick up my paper. Despite how much he disliked me, he told me, "Sam, I've been teaching this class for over 10 years. This is the best paper I have ever read. Can I use this as an example for future classes?" I gained a ton of respect for him that day because I knew how hard it had to be for him to admit that. I had a teacher, Mr. Lakes, who was a young idealistic gentleman who wanted to challenge our minds. One day he asked, if you could control all the news, all the media, but you had to give up 80% of your money, would you? Most people said no. I had the highest grade in the class and always strived to impress him, and I happily exclaimed I would, and that no one else got it. He beamed at me joyfully. The reality is I had no clue why you would do it. It was just the right answer to him. He was trying to make a point at how powerful media is and how much control it has. I look at the media nowadays, the news, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, all of it, and look how much control it has over our lives. How a single tweet can ruin a career, how an opinion can get you attacked, and how easily people are turned against each other. I look around everywhere and realize how right Mr. Lakes was, and the point he was trying to make. Sadly, his audience was a gaggle of idiotic inner city schools kids who didn't give a shit. And wonky sass just looking for validation. You're too young, you'll hold back the class. Later, you haven't even mastered the basics. I don't want you to take the next course. My high school computer science teacher, attempting to discourage me from taking programming as a freshman. After I topped best student in the class, he tried again to keep me from taking the next level course. He was so persistent in his discouragement, often mocking me in class. Most kids and parents would have given up after such an onslaught, but I'm glad my mother was persistent and supportive. Many years later and now a successful adult, I see that teacher for what he is, a jealous and sad man. Not something that was said, more something that happened. I had an asshole geography teacher, let's call him Mr. Davies, as that was his name, who I absolutely hated, and I'm 100% sure the feeling was mutual. I regularly skipped his class, and when I didn't, I made his life hell. One night I looked out my bedroom window to see a car crash at the end of my road. Being the nosy little cunt that I was, I ran to see what was going on and saw my nemesis, Mr. Davies, giving CPR to someone on the ground. I stood helplessly and watched this old Welsh dude give CPR to someone for more than 30 fucking minutes until the ambulance arrived. Apparently he was just cycling past and saw the crash and jumped into action. That guy is a fucking hero. Sorry for flicking ink on your beige trousers, my man X. I'm a 6 feet tall girl. At school I was very self-conscious that I was bigger than other people in my year. When I started 6th form I decided psychology would be interesting. The male teacher gave us all magazines and asked us to pick someone we found attractive. In my magazine was a picture of Johnny Depp, so obviously as a 16 over 17-year-old girl I picked him. The teacher went round the class telling us why we had picked certain people and what it said about us. When he got to me he kinda laughed and said you picked someone older because you are a big girl and that makes you feel more secure. Being called a big girl might not seem that bad, and I'm sure he didn't mean it in a derogatory way, but it was crushing. Even now 15 years later I still feel like I'm too big, I'm in the way, that I'm not beautiful because of my size. One stupid comment really can make a difference.